You know, we throw around the word species all the time. Homo sapiens, Tyrannosaurus rex. It seems so simple, right? Just a label we stick on things. But what if I told you that simple little word is hiding a massive philosophical puzzle, one that goes back thousands of years? So, let's really get into it. What is a species? Because believe me, the answer totally flips the script on how we look at the entire story of life on Earth. It turns out this has been a huge debate for decades between biologists and philosophers, and it all boils down to this wild question. Is a species just an abstract idea we made up, like the category chair, or is it a real, actual thing that exists out there in the world, like you? All right, to figure out where this all got so complicated, we've got to jump in a time machine and go way, way back, long before Darwin ever set foot on the Beagle. Okay, so for pretty much all of human history, the answer seems super obvious. It was this idea called essentialism. The easiest way to wrap your head around it is to think of a recipe. Imagine there's a perfect, unchanging recipe for dog, and every single dog you've ever seen is just one version of that recipe. The key part? The recipe itself is fixed. It never, ever changes. And wow, was this idea sticky. I mean, it lasted for ages. You had Plato, who thought of species as these imperfect shadows of some perfect form up in the heavens. Then Aristotle, he brought that idea down to earth. He said, no, the form is inside the organism and it just gets copied from parent to kid. And then you fast forward centuries later to Linnaeus, the guy who literally invented our modern classification system, and his whole world was built on the idea that species were created once and never ever change. And then the 19th century rolls around, and one guy with one book just completely demolishes that entire 2,000-year-old foundation. Right, so in 1859, Charles Darwin publishes The Origin of Species. And this book, it wasn't just about some interesting finches he saw. No, it was a direct assault on that whole fixed blueprint idea. Darwin's big point was that species are not static. They change, they morph, they evolve. They are not eternal recipes. And this, well, this created a huge problem, a massive conflict. Think about it. If the recipe for a species can change from one generation to the next, then the very thing that was supposed to define it, that unchanging essential blueprint, poof, it's gone. This was a serious headache for biology. I mean, you just can't have it both ways, right? If you define something by a fixed checklist of properties, it cannot change those properties without just becoming something else entirely. So how on earth do species evolve? It seems like a paradox. So this question just hung there for a while. Then, in the 1970s, a philosopher named David Hull comes along with a solution that is, well, it's pretty mind-bending. He basically said, hey everyone, we've been looking at this completely backwards. So what was his big idea? He said a species isn't a type of thing. It's a single thing. Let that sink in for a second. It's not an abstract concept. It's a huge, sprawling, physical individual that exists in space and time. Okay, so here's the key difference he was talking about. You have a class, like the word bachelor. It's defined by properties, unmarried, male. If a bachelor gets married, he's not an evolved bachelor. He's just not a bachelor anymore. He's out of the class. But then you have an individual, like you. You can change dramatically over your life, from a baby to a kid to an adult, but you're still the same individual. Hull's argument was that species are like you, not like the class bachelor. And just like that, this way of thinking completely solves the evolution problem. See, an individual can change its properties and still be the same individual. It can be born, that's speciation. It can die, that's extinction. All of its parts, which are just the individual organisms like us, are connected through ancestry. They form this one continuous thing through history. A species, in Hull's view, is basically one giant time-traveling organism. Now, Hull's idea was a total game changer, absolutely revolutionary. But the story doesn't end there. The debate wasn't over. Another philosopher came along and said that while Hull was definitely onto something important, he missed one crucial little detail about the word species itself. This is where philosopher John Dupree enters the picture. He basically said, whoa, hold on a second. Hull is totally right that these giant, evolving lineages exist. But he's wrong to try and steal the word species for them. The real problem, according to Dupree, is that we're trying to make one word do two completely different jobs. Think of it like this. Job number one, we need the word species as a practical tool, a classification system, a box to sort things into. That's a class. But then there's job number two. we have this unit of evolution, that big historical individual that Hull was talking about. Dupre's genius insight was realizing that these two things, they aren't always the same. And not only are they not always the same, sometimes the actual unit of evolution is totally useless for the day-to-day work of a biologist or a forester or even just someone who likes to go bird watching. A perfect example? American oak trees. We all recognize dozens of different kinds, right? You've got your white oak, your red oak. They look different, they live in different environments, their wood is different. But, and this is a huge but, they can all interbreed with each other. They can exchange genes. So from an evolutionary standpoint, they're all part of one single massive unit of evolution. But can you imagine telling a forester that all those different oaks are actually just one species? It would be completely absurd. It's useless. We need those separate classifications to make sense of the world. So Dupre's argument really comes down to priority. The word species has had a job for thousands of years, and that job is classification. You can't just come along and say, sorry, you're fired. We're giving your name to this other concept, this unit of evolution. The job title species was already taken.
Okay, so if Hull's evolving individual isn't called a species, then what is it? Well, the answer is incredible. It actually comes from the very beginning of our story.
It turns out there was already a name for this exact concept and was just hiding in plain sight in a text that's over 2,000 years old. And get this, it's from the same philosopher who got us into this whole mess in the first place, Aristotle.
Yeah, back in his work called Categories, Aristotle says something really interesting. He makes this distinction. He says an individual thing, like a specific man or a particular horse, is what he calls a primary substance. But then he says the species man or the genus animal are something else. They're secondary substances.
And if you look at this ancient idea through a modern lens, it fits perfectly. A secondary substance isn't just an abstract category. It's the larger physical generation-spanning thing that all the individual organisms, the primary substances, are parts of. It's exactly what David Hall was describing as an evolving individual, but Aristotle named it 2,300 years earlier. It's amazing. And just like that, the whole puzzle clicks into place. The word species gets to keep its old job as a useful sorting tool, a class. And the actual thing that evolves, that giant historical individual, it gets its proper and really, really old name back, a secondary substance. So that leaves us with a final, pretty mind-blowing thought to chew on. The next time you're at a zoo and you see a gorilla, ask yourself what you're really looking at. Is that animal just a single member of the category gorilla? Or are you actually looking at a tiny, temporary part of a single, immense, four-dimensional being, a substance that stretches millions of years into the past, and maybe, just maybe, millions of years into the future?